This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And in this week's episode, he's taking a look at more of the sci-fi weaponry of Bethesda's Starfield.
But if one service rifle can survive to the 2300s and still be in use, it will be the Kalashnikov.
If you want to see more of Jonathan reacting to Starfield's guns, subscribe and make sure to check out our previous episode. And if you're interested in buying Starfield, GameSpot's sister site Fanatical is selling the premium edition of the game, and you can save 17% when you use the code Fanatical17. Details are in the description of this video, and just an FYI, GameSpot and Fanatical are both Fandom companies. Right, over to Jonathan and the guns of Starfield.
This is like an Origin 12 in receiver architecture terms. Obviously, it's not a shotgun.
We're moving away from the 7.77 caliber of last episode to an 11 caliber for this, 11mm caliber ammunition for this weapon.
Okay, that might explain the similarity I'm seeing to the Vostek, because a big diameter cartridge would make some sense to have a big open double ejection port cover setup like this. It has to have a large magazine, it has to have a large magazine well, it has to have a large ejection port. So the bigger the round, the chunkier the receiver has to be. And I think they might have taken a bit of a cue from the Vostek Origin, but it's so different. I wouldn't say it's based on it. Apart from anything else, the USAS 12, also shotgun, that also has a big open receiver with AR style dust covers, which is what we're seeing here. So there are various things it could have been inspired by. To me, it looks like an original design with a few cues from modern guns. Last time I was talking about heat sinks and how essential those would be for use in a vacuum, irrelevant really for atmospheric use, but in a vacuum. And here we have multiple flaps open with inside what looks like they could well be heatsink, explaining the bulk of the weapon. And you have pipes running across the top as well that to me feel like they're part of the cooling system. Now, if I'm right with any of that, then you immediately have to question, is this a weapon designed for use in a vacuum and the others aren't? Because I'm guessing you're going to be using a lot of the other weapons in a vacuum in the game. But the trouble is, if you take one set of design requirements, like it must be usable in a vacuum, say, and apply that to all the guns in your game, well, they're all going to look very similar, potentially. Anyway, what I like about this is it looks like it's a believable, gritty firearm, as it were, but it has enough space stuff going on. And the fact that it's 11mm chunky rounds starting to edge into Warhammer Bolter territory a little bit. A big, slow-firing, compact, automatic weapon.
Don't say Bolter, I'll make you explain the gyrojet for the 9th time as the comments keep referencing.
So if you're doing a sci-fi movie, you would design maybe 2 or 3 of these, and they could all be consistent design language and logic, and you're done. But for something like this, you've got to make dozens of the damn things.
Yeah, usually sci-fi weapons this is the base weapon for this faction, this is the base weapon for this faction. I instantly thought of you because the handguard just looks like it was carved out of the EM2.
Ah, interesting. There was something going on in my brain looking at the wooden furniture, and I couldn't place it. But now that you say EM2, yeah, it does. It does. It looks like it could have been chopped out of an EM2 and then attached to this. The overall design is really cool. Again, with the wood that we saw last time, very futuristic lines and mostly metal. But the way the wood is carved in a really non-traditional way. It's almost like a parallel universe where we haven't invented polymer and we're still using wood, but we want the ergonomics and the aesthetics of polymer. The gun itself does not really jibe with any real-world design. You'd normally expect a big bore rifle to have a great big magazine on it, but this has a very small magazine that inserts into the gun flush. This is an interesting halfway house ammo-wise between the sort of semi-standard caseless rounds that we've seen and the conventional cased ammo that the pirate faction has. Here we've got polymer cased ammunition, which we very nearly, I say we, which America, the United States of America, very nearly adopted rifle and machine gun under the Next Generation Squad Weapon Program. We could have had a telescoped cased plastic ammunition. I don't know if this was supposed to be telescope case. They don't look long enough for that. Telescoped in this case just means the bullet's set all the way into the case. So it's a more compact unit. But they didn't go that route. They went for conventional cased ammunition with a higher pressure capability. But depending when case, telescope, and caseless came back in this universe, it would be a bit strange for both of them to persist in use, because if caseless is perfected, then why bother with plastic cases? But hey. Now the gun's quite strange, because to me it resembles nothing as much as the Origin 12 shotgun, which we're fortunate to have an example of in the collection. General proportions, the very big open receiver, and the very almost like lattice work machined bolt carrier are all very Origin 12 shotgun, but this is clearly a submachine gun. So what I'm going to do is show off a recent acquisition, which is the Scorpion Evo 3. Not brand new by any means, but it's new to us, and we're very pleased to have an example of this very modern submachine gun. So they're a match in terms of their role at the very least, and the general chunkiness of the design, with a relatively short barrel with the full length receiver coming all the way to just behind this muzzle device. But that's where it kind of the comparison kind of breaks down. This thing has a buffer tube style buttstock, again more like the Origin 12. The Evo does not have that big open receiver. That's it locked open. You can see this is a normal firearm where the ejection port is as small as possible to minimize ingress of dirt and everything. Things like the Origin 12 are niche weapons that aren't so worried about sealing the action, although they do have a big dust cover that closes. Not a bang-on match by any means, but it looks very sci-fi, I think, and it's the right type of weapon. Now this is firing 9x19 pistol ammunition. The Scorpion Evo 3 is actually a polymer receiver. So it's not one of these with a polymer lower and a machined upper. It is entirely polymer. It's much more like a UMP, the HK UMP. Folding buttstock with, and here's a slightly space gun touch, a magnet butt closure in the stowed position. It's not held shut by a polymer clip or a metal clip. It's literally an insert of steel where the serial number is marked and a magnet on the stock, and it can't fly open when you don't want it to. In the open position, it is held by a conventional latch. But I just thought that a magnet on a firearm, I don't think I've seen a magnet on a firearm before. I could be wrong. Okay, this is really cool. There's something about a grid array of gunfire that's completely new. I haven't seen that done in any media before. And believe it or not, it has a historical precedent. The Montigny Mitrailleuse, a very early machine gun. I think we can call it a machine gun because you don't once you start firing it doesn't have to keep firing until it's empty. It is under the control of the firer. You can't really call it a machine gun if it all just fires when you press a button and you've got no control over it. Weapons like that go way back and work in different ways. But the Mitrailleuse would have had a block chamber that you insert into the breech, and it will fire in sequence. Not at this rate of fire, but I doubt the developers know what the Mitrailleuse was or is. This is probably coincidence, but I love historical reflections like this. In terms of gameplay, I guess it's a bit like a shotgun spread, but with an automatic weapon and a major cool factor. And again, it's this magnetically accelerated, it's like a very high rate of fire railgun type system. Unusual, interesting, fun, futuristic, with a weird historical parallel. Size of the feed chute doesn't seem to match the size of the muzzles. It's the second time I've seen muzzles that are too big for the round, seemingly, but I could be wrong.
It's called the Microgun, but that's already a name of a multi-barrel firearm, right?
Correct. Yes, the Microgun is the 5.56mm spin-off of the minigun, which is the 7.62mm spin-off of the Vulcan 20mm cannon. So we do already have a Microgun, but just like minigun has almost become a generic term replacing Gatling gun, sort of. It's more of a brand name though. It's possible that in the future a minigun might be a rifle caliber Gatling gun, a Microgun might be any intermediate or pistol caliber Gatling gun. So sort of works, but what they aren't doing here is replicating the actual Microgun. Now, what's the point of the Microgun? Well, it's very cool. You can carry an awful lot more ammunition, but still have that very high rate of fire. So there is a potential tactical niche for the modern day Microgun. I think here the point might be it's sufficiently low recoil that you could actually keep your rounds on target. If you fire a 7.62 minigun from the hip, your first couple of bullets might hit, but the rest will be way off. With a 5.56 gun, I haven't seen it done, but I imagine it's if you're sufficiently built, you might actually be able to keep this thing on target. Is it practical? No, it is not. Unless you have an exoskeleton built into your spacesuit, perhaps. Right, so the rounds are in fact square, not just the cases or the propellant, because this is not ejecting cases, it's only ejecting links. So you have square bores, square projectiles, square blocks of propellant that are somehow coated and they have colours. Historical caseless ammo, when it's been tried, has just been a sort of whatever colour the propellant is as a solid block. There's no reason why it couldn't be coated in something that lets you put information on there, colour coding, and that would just get burned up with the propellant when it's fired. I guess that's what they're going for. Caseless ammo into metallic links seems like a really questionable thing to do because propellant is not as strong as a case. That's the whole point of a case. So I would question that if this was trying to be practical. The design is very cool. You could almost see this as an alternate sort of Star Trek phaser or something. A fairly traditional gun plan form. I mean, it's funny, this basic L-shape handgun shape goes right back to the 1500s with a wheel-lock pistol in our collection that, unlike most wheel-locks that are almost like a straight or banana shape, this thing is very distinctly L-shaped. And you can see that plan form all the way through. Actually, some rare early percussion pistols that have that shape to them, through to things like the classic 1911, the Glock. It makes visual sense as the same basic shape, the grasping with a barrel, with a trigger guard, with a very white, slick, futuristic design to it. I'm not sure why the whole upper part of the gun is reciprocating and it's going forward rather than coming to the rear under recoil, and yet the whole gun does have recoil. So maybe that's meant to be a recoil mitigation for this hypervelocity beam of particles. A lot of the weapons in this game have significant recoil, which I think is interesting. There's some sort of attachment system, but again, we have iron sights. So as high-tech as this is, it still has tiny little Colt 1911 style iron sights. Can't see that happening. The whole upper comes fully forward for the reload as well, which again is, I don't know why that would be the case, but interesting to watch. Very linear recoil for all of the weird recoil that the guns in this game have, that sort of oscillates and flips quite dramatically. The AK, famous for relatively quite a bit of muzzle rise, we get none of that. This thing just recoils a fair bit, but it recoils straight back at the user. Almost a little bit of a throwback to earlier games where recoil was not modeled in the way that it is now. So that's a little curious. This is essentially just an AKM. There are some differences. I mean, the top cover blends with the front trunnion in a way that it shouldn't. It should be more visibly a separate piece. Something's off with the ribbing, I think. We have a weird polymer handguard attached by what looks like a car seatbelt, or it's probably meant to be some duct tape or something, I'm not sure. And too many machined rings on the barrel, I think. Where I'm going with this is, it's supposed to be just an AKM. that's been sort of kept in service by attaching bits to it. Now, in terms of longevity, the typical AK, a typical any self-loading or automatic rifle, if vaguely well cared for, will last a century in working order. I mean, we've got stuff in here that's over a century old and would still work. So could it last 2-3 centuries and still be working? Well, if it's seen a lot of use in the meantime, probably not. These things have, video games overdo this with wearing out and breaking mechanics, but they are reflecting the reality of barrels have a finite life. Materials have limits and lives to them. You cannot just keep shooting the same thing forever. Yes, you can replace parts, but if one service rifle can survive to the 2300s and still be in use, it will be the Kalashnikov.
On the inspect view, you can see in very small writing, made in China. So I was expecting the Type 56 full ring sight.
Ah, you see. Yes, well, I suspect that is more of a Easter egg to the Chinese assault rifle from Fallout. And I'm almost disappointed that they didn't use their own Chinese assault rifle as the basis for this. But not really, because I'd rather have Space AK. So this weapon, it looks very cool. Anything with multiple barrels tends to look cool. And we've got the rainbow lasers from last time, 2 at once. And this really shows you how crazy the amount of dispersion there is, or built-in inaccuracy there is to what should be straight laser beams. I mean, the beams are straight, but they are like randomly going in different directions and like crossing the streams at points because we're firing 2 shots. I don't know. If it was me, I would be looking to make laser weapons absolutely dead-on accurate every time, but maybe nerf the damage, something like that. Because to have them just be crazily inaccurate for no reason strikes me as a bit strange. This one is mimicking a firearm a bit more than some of the other energy weapons, in that it has a magazine position where rounds would need to feed, but it doesn't need to feed rounds. So that energy pack could be fitted anywhere. It could be a buttstock, it could be replacement unit that is the buttstock. There's no reason why you would mimic a magazine feed, which is actually quite awkward. You'll see people turning the weapon over to effect a reload, because having to feed from underneath is convenient only really for conventional firearms. Right, this is a pretty distinctive and unique design. So the barrel's on the bottom, and then there's a weird sort of, I guess it's the frame, or the upper part of the barrel assembly. So you have that distinctive 2-rod design with a sort of a very loosely arranged cylinder, sort of. It's more like a clip. The whole cylinder is thrown. It's not really a cylinder. They're more like reloadable chambers, like we get back in the early 16th century as an early form of reloadable firearm. And they're white, and they fire this white hot ammunition, which I guess is it a brand name for some sort of white phosphorus incendiary projectile. I like the design. I like the slick curvature with the built-in round counter. The overall design is very distinctive. It sort of harks back to 19th century percussion revolvers, and the wooden grips, nice touch as well. I'm not wild on the reload, so the breaking it open, okay, this technology doesn't require a solid frame, that's fine. So break open is okay, but the little tiny spindly peg that the speed loader cylinder sits on seems far too short and far too spindly to be effective. Otherwise, it's okay. I mean, nice big barrel release lever. For some reason, barrel release is written on it. It's a bit on the nose. And now I'm looking at an upgraded version with what looks like a early 21st century variable power optic with slightly squashed proportions. That really doesn't look advanced enough for this period. And a totally rejigged barrel and frame assembly. I'm not sure what advantage that conveys, but it does make the gun look different, and different sort of wraparound target grip there, and a relatively low bore axis with a sort of Chiappa style firing off the bottom chamber setup. But other than that, it doesn't really look like the Rhino or the Mateba. It's its own thing. So this is a baby semi-auto shotgun, or I guess a shot pistol, because it's very much in pistol configuration. The magazine's right at the back, so this is a bullpup, giving you the maximum barrel length which you need in such a short weapon. So that makes sense. Like almost everything else in the game, it's got the damn iron sights on it. But the only thing that's kind of irking me is the weird, unnecessarily elaborate folding AR-style cocking charging handle thing on the back. It's really bulky, unnecessary. Surely you would just need like protruding ears to get hold of to pull back the bolt, slide bolt, more of a bolt. I don't know why you need those big things on the side like that.
It's just called the Shotty as well, this one.
The Shotty?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny.
I decided on this gun's name at 5:30 on a Friday.
Yeah, it's a curious design. The frame, grip frame lower is basically the same as a modern self-loading pistol. The upper part is really quite different with this armature, is that the right word? Kind of girder arrangement over the top of the gun, and then a reciprocating half slide, which is probably an oblique reference to the Desert Eagle, which Urban Eagle is clearly a riff on. And 44 Ultra Mag is sort of, again, indicative that this is supposed to be a Magnum pistol. The trigger guard shape is quite Deagle as well. My colleague will kill me for using the Counter-Strike language, but sorry, Mike. It's a Deagle, Space Deagle. The iron sights are nuts. I've been complaining about iron sights in this game a lot, I know, but these make no sense at all. They're far too fragile, far too tall, and why are they necessary? They kind of ruin the lines of the design, to be honest with you, which is otherwise good and interesting. Maybe a little busy. I'm not sure what's going on the underside where the accessory rail would be on a conventional pistol. Otherwise, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a Magnum pistol in a video game. It's not doing anything particularly noteworthy. Thanks for watching. Those were more guns from the game Starfield. You never know, there might even be a part 3. I always like to say, I am of course from the Royal Armouries here in the UK. Do come and visit us if you can, and if you can't, check out our website and you can find from there our various social media channels, details of events, of anything online that's going on, and our own YouTube channel where you can see more of me if that's the sort of thing that you might enjoy. And if not, there's some cool guns. We'll see you again next week.